Hello, everyone. Welcome to Start Your Dungeons. I'm Adam,
I'm Bryce.
and today we are talking about the new Cyberpunk Red combat zone skirmish game.
Yeah, it's a skirmish game. So this one made by Monster Fight Club. That's kind of been out for a little bit. I know it was kickstarted, I believe, originally, and now it's gotten out to Kickstarter and then out to retail. But it is a skirmish game. However, I would argue this is a campaign-driven miniature game is the better way to describe it, probably. Just because I think skirmish game, it is low model count, but I think campaigns are where this game really shines.
Okay, so what comes in this box?
A lot. So you get, what's really cool, I want to say this now, if you are a fan of the Cyberpunk Red role-playing game, all of this stuff can be used for that. All of the stuff that they've already made for the Cyberpunk Red RPG for miniatures and like buildings work in this game. So I want to make that first of all clear because I think the value is here already, but the value of how much you can use this for is insane. So you get two forces. You get the Maelstrom and the Tiger Claw faction. You get this really nice cardboard board that you play on. I like a lot better than GW quality, honestly. And my reason for it is it doesn't fold stupidly. It folds to where it's not going to peel or move. You get a bunch of these walls and connector pieces that you can use. And I can flip one around. It also has little areas you can add little benches and things and like parts of the wall to climb up on.
You get this really cool container.
Yep. And then you get your own little barricades that you can use for it. You get dice, enough for each player because you're only ever rolling one dice really at a time. You've got your cards for everybody. What's cool is, like I said, this is a campaign game, so they have their basic versions and their upgraded versions. A bunch of little gear tokens that you can use for everybody because you can accumulate gear. A bunch of missions. I believe there's 12 total in this set.
That's pretty
good.
Then
the range rulers, which are hard to see on here, but they have green, yellow, and red as different lines. And we'll talk about that as we move on. But this is nicer than I thought it would be. At first, I was like, ugh, because, like, again, I hate to kind of crap on the Games Workshop, but when we did the Warrior reviews and all those, like, they had these are better than those ones. Yeah.
Like, even though they seem, I don't know, maybe thinner, but
they seem less flimsy almost.
Yeah.
Very nicely well done.
Yep. So what about assembling all this stuff? Like the miniatures and the terrain pieces?
So all the terrain, what's really nice is if you guys can see, it's basically built to where everything uses these interconnectors to pop in and off. So you can actually pull this off and make the terrain however you want. And I actually think that's something that's really cool about the terrain sets. And again, these work for the role-playing game, but if you already own stuff from the role-playing game, that works as well. You know, any of the buildings and different things. Monster Fight Club did a really good job with these buildings, actually. They are high-quality buildings and high-quality cardboard. I feel like they're not going to break and be flimsy compared to a lot of others. Nice art. They're very well, like...
There's, like, graffiti
Yeah, graffiti and drawings on them.
Really neat looking.
Model-wise, here's what I'll say on models. They are mostly two-piece models, three-piece models, maybe even one-piece. They are easy to assemble. When we talk about what we need to assemble them, I'll talk a little bit more because they were a little rough in some areas.
Well, let's just talk about that now then. I mean, these are hard plastic,
like a hard plastic, kind of like higher than board game quality, but also like these are not Games Workshop quality models. I have not really used a lot of the Cyberpunk Red like RPG miniatures, but I've heard that these are very similar to those. So they did have, and I'll pull out the leader of the Tiger Claws, for example. She has a sword on her back that was just covered in flashing. I had to remove a ton of it. So if you think these models are going to be like top level Games Workshop quality models, they're not. Like they are nice quality and they're very not flimsy, I think is really the nice thing about them. They're a little bit thicker, but they have a really kind of like they have a lot of flashing and some mold lines every now and then that are a little bit tough to clean up because these are actually pretty detailed, I will say, for being plastic models, but it's something where you're going to spend some time probably cleaning them up. If you're new to the hobby with cleaning, it might be a little bit more. The other thing I really want to make sure to mention, please wash these miniatures with soap and water. I did have a lot of releasing agent from when they were put in their molds. Quite a bit on these guys. One of the Maelstrom guys literally had what looked like powder all over his back.
If you're new to assembling miniatures and painting miniatures, that release agent, it looks like powder, or sometimes it won't be very visible.
It's a slimy.
It'll feel, there'll be like a texture to it after you finish touching it. Your fingers feel a little weird. Just a little bit of like warm water and a little bit of like dishwashing soap. Just, scrub them with a toothbrush or something.
Yeah.
And your paint's going to stick better. You will have a much easier time attaching them with glue. It saves you so much time in the long run if you give them a little wash.
Yeah, and I really do recommend those with these. Again, I don't think they're bad models, but I do think if you're coming from like a Games Workshop, these are a little bit lower quality in terms of like hard plastic. But they're still not.
But they
bad.
still look good.
Yeah, like I genuinely, at first when I built them, I was a little disappointed and was like, I don't know if I really want to paint these. But the more I've looked at them and kind of watched some other people paint them, the more I'm like, yeah, I want to paint these.
Are there any cheat sheets in the box?
There's not a whole lot. So there's this little thing on the back
like a
that
rule
kind of
summary.
tells you rule summary. There's everybody's card is kind of built out a certain way to explain everything for you. When we get into talking about more of like the cards themselves and like techniques, or not techniques, but terminology and things like that, we'll talk a little bit about that. But every unit has a card. There's a lot of cards in this game. So what's nice is everything's on your card. So all of your stats that matter are on it, all your abilities, and then basically it's a bunch of card stuff. I think really though, this is honestly just enough. Once you kind of get that basic character economy down and know what you can do, it's pretty easy to kind of understand that.
And I actually appreciated that, like, even though, and I'll show I'll put up a picture of one of the cards. It looks like there's a lot on them, but everything's pretty easy to follow.
Right.
I was kind of surprised at how easy it was to figure out what my characters were doing, even though it looks a little busy on the eyes.
Yeah.
It was pretty easy.
What's nice is that everyone has an array of stats that they can have, but not everyone has every available stat. So somebody might have melee and somebody might have like ranged as one of their stats, but if you don't have that, you're not adding any bonuses to your dice. So it really is helpful for you to kind of figure out what you're good at, which I think is nice, but also it doesn't bog you down with a bunch of like, oh, you don't have a tech stat, so I wrote tech 0 on your card. You know what I mean? It's just adding more for no reason.
How easy is it to get into the game?
I mean,
If you buy the starter box, is that like...
I think that's the best way to do it. So we'll talk price now. This is $120. This is a fantastic buy-in because we talked about it being a campaign game. So this game is built on building a campaign and your crew basically leveling up, getting enough influence to make it out of the red zone. And for anyone who's played the Cyberpunk Red world, this happens between the time of Cyberpunk Red and the times of Cyberpunk 2077 video game.
Okay.
So it's in between those time points where the reason it's called the red zone is because it's full of radiation after the war. So your goal is to get out. But what I like about this campaign system is this pretty much goes all the way through a campaign and has a stopping point, where a lot of other games, unfortunately, don't have like a stopping point or you have to make your own. This game pushes you towards an end game with its campaign, and I really like that about it.
Yeah, that's really interesting. That kind of ties in the RPG element to it because it actually has a story ending. So can you easily find information that you need in this, in the materials?
I think the rulebook's a little bit tough at times. I think it's laid out a little bit funky almost because it covers a lot of basic things at the front and then goes into each individual thing later on. So sometimes I had trouble figuring out where something was in the rule book at times, where it might be like I assumed it was in one spot and then it's in another area of the rule book. However, it's not a bad rule book, and one of the things I like is, like, for a game, it tells you, determine the size of your game. Here's the page you need. Build your team. Here's the page you need. Choose your scenario. Like, it helps you kind of, like, figure out where to go and, like, start a game and how to do your turns, and also a little bit of, like, If you're activating your inspiring, that's on page 12. Like, it does a really good job of helping you kind of find some things when you need it.
Yeah.
But the front of the book is actually a lot of about the city itself. So it talks about all the different gangs that are available that you can play. What's really nice is right now they have 7 gangs basically that you can play. There's actually more than that, but that's like the 7 groups. And then you have edge runners, which are their own game, but also mercenaries that you can add to your force as you play in scenarios.
Does it require a lot of memorizing keywords?
Yes. There are a lot of keywords in this game. I think there's about 2 or 3 pages in the back that are just on keywords. A lot of them are very similar, like something that says deadly crits. Well, when you assume when you roll a crit, it's going to do something then. There's some little ones like suppression, pierce, other ones that appear. A lot of it you'll pick up very quickly over a while, but I think originally it looks daunting, but there's actually not a ton of like keywords that are used. I feel like there's a lot of them are repeated over and over again. So once you learn it for one card, you're not having to learn a bunch of other ones for each card.
And, how much of it is symbol based?
So all your stats are tied to symbols. So everything that you have a stat for, and we'll post a card up, like Adam said, it might have a reflex symbol next to it. That means when you roll a reflex save, that's what you have. So you do have that to be able to help you. There are a few symbols for the range as well. Everything that's range based is colored. So if it's like, oh, I have a range of yellow, it means from here to here I can use that ability. So there is that in the game, but I think there's a little bit more keywords than there are symbols probably. There are symbols on the dice. If you roll the highest value ever, that's a crit. If you roll the lowest, it's a fumble. But other than that, there's not. It's less than I thought. At first, again, when I got into this, I was kind of like worried about looking at some of the cards, but once you start to play it, it's pretty easy. Oh, and also your actions are built around symbols. So whatever the color is of your action determines what the dice and your movement range for it, which is a really cool aspect.
I really like that because at least for me, I wasn't searching a lot trying to find what I had to do because since it's just the same color for movement and actions, and there's a die that's attached to it, it made things so much simpler.
And because everything in here is opposed, if you're using a yellow action, that means you're using a yellow D8. Well, then your opponent has to make a defense roll, and if they're like, I have green and yellows, I might pick to use the green because it has a higher chance because it's a D12, but if you get wounded in this game, your die drops to a D6 no matter what.
Yeah.
So like using a D12 is a risk at times because if you roll bad and I roll really well, you might lose that D12. And that's a really cool idea of how they've done this system.
What would you need to expand the game?
So I talked about already like what's offered for this. If you own the Cyberpunk Red like miniatures that have been made for the role-playing game and stuff, there's a $10 box you can buy. It has cards for every model they've ever released for that, the role-playing game.
Oh, so all the miniatures for the RPG you can add into this.
You can add into this for scenarios and special play and things.
That's cool.
$10 box is really cool. All of the terrain that they use for that game can be used in here. Again, like I said, this terrain is fantastic. It's kind of all built to play around with. The other thing that I really like though is the way they've kind of made this game very expandable is you can buy a gangs. Gangs are around $40-$50, but what's nice is it's not just models in the gang. They have all the cards for them, all their upgrades, all their campaign rules, their special missions. It's a lot in each box, and I actually think they're really good value for what they are. And then they have like $15 or $20 mini boxes that have like your gonks for your faction. There's some like edge runners factions that can be used. There's some really cool factions. I mean, that's one of the things that I really like is you can kind of play whatever you want. And you can really pick and choose. Like I picked up, and we just played a game with what's called Generation Red, which is a bunch of kids basically running around. I mean, they've got a kid with like a hockey stick hitting you, and like a kid with a bicycle. There's kids on skateboards and bicycles. Like it's fun, it's silly, and I really like playing them. So that's why I picked them up. But this world has so many different options, and I think I've already liked that they've really put a lot of effort into releasing a bunch of different things for it. And, our local store has a bunch, and that's really what got me into this was our local guy here at our game store telling me, like, hey, I'm really excited for this. We should try it. And I picked it up. And at first I was like, I'm going to be honest. Like, we talked originally. I was like, it looks okay. But the more I played it, the more I've really, really enjoyed the simplicity of its action system and how much fun it is to easily jump in and play a game.
So who is this box set for? Is this for new players, seasoned players who would benefit from this?
From a gameplay standpoint, I think you could be a new player and do this. It is very different from a lot of other games.
Maybe watch some videos on
There's
how to
not a
play?
lot,
Oh, okay.
unfortunately, online. There's some demos they've done at Gen Con
Maybe
and things.
you should make one. Maybe we should do a how-to for the channel.
We might have to. So we might have to do that. But one of the things I think that this game is good about is so I did a demo night the other night. I have somebody who's never played miniature games pick up a squad box for $50, and he gets the game. Now he didn't buy the starter because he was like, if you guys are going to be up here, I'll just play with y'all and then pick up the starter at a later point. But I think it is good. I think from a hobby aspect, if you're not like me and a little bit OCD about cleaning up your models, you can just throw them on the board. There is some flash on them, and that's a bit of a pain. But I think it's not a hard game to play, and the models are pretty easy. Like, they're mostly 2 or 3 piece. They're really not striving. The only kid that was hard was honestly the kid on the bicycle, because he has like multiple ways he sits on the bicycle, and that irritated me.
Also, I mean, they have so much detail. These would take speed paints or contrast paints really nicely.
I think these are very good for the whole slap chop movement.
Yeah, if you want to do slap chop style painting, if you haven't heard of that, there are so many YouTube videos about slap chop painting.
I think the heavy contrast paint or speed paint kind of style to these look great. I think you can do what's really nice about this game is because you're in that kind of like cyberpunk setting. Neon colors are going to look great as well. So something fun and stylish is going to look good on these guys. And I think if you are a newer player to miniature games, this is a decent box set for price, as well as like getting into and like being able to play and having longevity because there's so many missions and there's a campaign. I'm going to say this for seasoned players. If you do like other miniature games that are more sci-fi, this one might appeal to you. The game I'm actually thinking about and that we have played and don't like, and I like this version better, is if anyone's played the game Infinity. We are not huge fans of that game. It's just not for us.
I wanted so much to like that game, and I know it has a huge following. I love the look of the game. Yeah. I like the look of the miniatures. I hate assembling them. I hate trying to keep them assembled because they fall apart no matter what glue I use. I don't like the rule set. Yeah. There's just so much about that game. I don't like the terrain. Yeah, I like the way the terrain looks. Yeah. I don't actually like the terrain.
I think this is if you've ever played that game and was turned off by it and was looking for something in that same sort of vein where you have the potential to react to your opponents doing something, this fits a good like middle ground.
This is it. This is the game that I wanted Infinity to be.
Yeah, it's very well done. It's very, and like I said, if you like Infinity, you might like this still. But I think if you ever played Infinity and went, I kind of wanted a simpler. I'm not saying this game is exactly the same, but it does have a lot of like similar ideas for how the reaction sort of system works.
And finally, would you keep playing based on this box?
I'm in deep. I literally bought this box set. I assembled it. We were gonna review it for the channel. I went to a demo day. And I ended up selling a bunch of Magic cards to the store to be able to pick up my Generation Red team, and we are going to run a campaign in the new year, and I'm pumped.
That sounds about right.
Yeah, I've never I've had a lot of games where I played them and gone like, this is fun, but I've never played, I think this game really finally is the one there where I went, I've looked for a sci-fi campaign game, and there's tons of them out there. I played Necromunda. I've tried Infinity, and
Stargrave.
Like Stargrave and all those other ones, and like this one just fits right to me. Like the system is fun. The models are pretty good. The combat is solid. The way it does dice actions, I think, is so cool. And actually, like we didn't talk about it a whole bunch really, but like I genuinely think the dice system and how you have to bet them and hope that you don't get wounded so they get worse is such a cool flipping idea. Like it is so cool
because the game could turn on its head in an instant.
Yeah, and what's great is like I could roll a yellow dice, that's a D8. You can roll a green, that's a D12. If you roll bad enough, I just took your green die to a D6. Yeah. Like that's nasty. Yeah. There is so many cool little things. And what's cool is we didn't talk about it as well is you don't have to activate a model like in most games. You can move a guy and then go, oh, I'm done with him, and go back to him again.
Yeah.
If he still has action. So there's a lot to this game. I mean, I can talk about it a lot. I think it genuinely does fit a niche in my like sort of miniature gaming that I've been trying to fill. This one really filled it for me.
Yeah. Well, I hope you guys try it out. I went into it blind, not really knowing what to expect, and it took me just a really short time to know what was going on and be able to play. And I'm not a person who gets games like this quickly.
No.
So I was able to just run with it, and it was great. So probably one of my top picks for skirmish games for the year, I would say.
Yeah, no, I think this one definitely knocked it out of the park. It came kind of out of nowhere for me too. You know, I had heard about it, didn't do the Kickstarter for it, and now that it's out and about in stores, I think like I said, if you're looking for something with a cyberpunk feel for a small cost game to get into, I think it's hard to beat this.
Yeah. Well, just let us know what you think in the comments if you've played it, and or if you want to know more about it, and we'll see you next time.
Y'all take care.
Bye.